That's confusing. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you're not on. Okay. Hi everyone. It's me and Vicky here. Okay, so I wanted to give this share. Wait, someone was something in the chat. Cameras off. Ah, that's okay. 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 I saw this really a few beautiful ideas by this couple, Asaf with Sophia Zilberfeld, and they're a couple in Israel, and they do learning for couples. So it's like they'll bring couples out to have a chavruta together, which is a really just a nice idea, and then they'll prepare like a whole source sheet. I found one of their ideas that I thought was really interesting, and just looking inside also the sources, just it's a really beautiful idea. Okay, so basically the Gemara establishes that the mitzvah of Chanukah is ner ish ubeto. Okay, each person is meant to have each person in his home. Those are the words. We're meant to be lighting our candles at home. So halachically, as we know, we're meant to light the candles either right outside of our houses or on our windowsill. So in Manchester, I haven't yet seen people with those like boxes or chanukkiot outside because the weather is not exactly permissive for that. But in Israel, it is quite but it is quite popular that people will light outside, like right in the front of their house. So the question is, and so basically it's facing from Reshut HaYachid towards Reshut HaRabim. Okay, so Reshut HaYachid is in your own private sector, and Reshut HaRabim is the public sector. So the question is, why not? If the whole purpose of this mitzvah is Pirsumei Nisa, right? We want to publicize this mitzvah. Why shouldn't we go around the streets and light Chanukiot, right? Why don't we do exactly what Chabad does, but why doesn't everybody do that? The whole mitzvah, the whole point is to go out and we want everyone to see, right? I don't know how many people go by Oakwell Mansions and see the Chanukiah in my windowsill, right? Maybe my neighbor across the road, but that's really it. So why aren't we doing that? Okay. So basically, when we're lighting our Chanukiah on a small scale, we're recreating the lighting of the menorah in the Beit HaMikdash. Okay. Now, in the Beit HaMikdash, there were these very special windows, okay? And you see that in Sefer Melachim. Now, when you look at this, when you try to translate the words of what this pasuk means, it's a bit confusing, okay? So if you look at the first source, it says, Vaya'as labayit chalonei shkufim atumim. Okay, so the question is, how do we translate these words? In modern Hebrew, shakuf is something that's transparent, that you can see through, and atum is something that's sealed off, something that's closed, okay? But when you look into the Mefarshim, into the sources, you see how they translate what kinds of windows they were like, okay? So we're going to look into the next source in Menachot. Okay, and they in Menachot they bring in this pasuk, and it's then they bring in the pasuk vayas lebayit chalonei. Okay, those are the things. Tana shkufim mibifnim. So the sages taught in a Braita that shkufim mibifnim va'atumim b'machutz lo leora ani tzarich. Okay, so typically windows are constructed to widen toward the inside, in order that the light from the outside would be dispersed throughout the room. But for the temple, God said, make the windows narrow within and broad without, as I do not require its illumination. Okay, so basically it's the opposite of what normally you would do inside a house if you're building a house. So you want the light to come, you want it to be more narrow on the outside and wide on the inside, because you're bringing in the light. You're trying to light up your house, right? You open your windows and you want the light to pour in and illuminate the room, right? To have natural lighting, especially in those times when they didn't have electricity. Okay, but what happened in the Beit HaMikdash was the opposite. And in Bamidbar Rabbah, they expand on this idea. Okay, so they bring in this pasuk from Yeshayahu, and they explain, Hashem chafetz lema'an tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir. The Lord was delighted because of his servant's righteousness to magnify and glorify the Torah. Okay, so what is this talking about? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, the reason why I'm telling you to light the menorah, it's not because I need this light. Lo bishvil shani tzarich lenerot. I don't need the actual light. Tzarticha ela lezakotam. The reason why I'm giving them this mitzvah, I don't want you to be confused that perhaps God needs this light. Rather, it's to give them this chut, to give them the merit of adding an additional mitzvah. And it says in Daniel, in Aramaic, and this is where Nehorai, our son's name, comes from. Unehora, Nehora means light. Okay, that's why in Hebrew it's meir. Unehora imei shrei, the light dwells within him. The light is within God. God is consumed by light. God is light, right? He doesn't need our light. Okay, and then there's this pasuk in Tehillim that says, even darkness is not dark to you, for night shines as the day and darkness becomes like the light. With God, with the divine, it's not the same concepts of light and darkness the way that we experiences it. Okay, and so therefore it comes to teach us God doesn't need us to light the menorah of human beings. And then he brings in this idea that we touched upon previously in Menachot. Teda, you should know, when a person builds a house, he makes chalonot tzarot mibachutz. The windows are narrow from outside, or rechavot mibifnim, and they're wide and broad from within side. Kedei sheyeh or nichnas mibachutz umeir mibifnim, so that the light comes from outside in order to illuminate from within. Shlomo bana Beit HaMikdash, but Shlomo builds the Beit HaMikdash. Lo sakach, he doesn't do it that way. Ela sa chalonot tzarot mibifnim, but he made it narrow on the inside and wide on the outside. Kedei she'eh ha'or yotzeh mibeit HaMikdash u'meir lachutz, so that the light that was inside of the Beit HaMikdash would go outwards to what was going on in the rest of the world. Okay, and so basically, what we're understanding from here is that God doesn't need our lights. Okay, the aim of the menorah in the Beit HaMikdash, it was to illuminate outwards physically on a technical physical level, but also spiritually, right? So that the light, it wouldn't be diluted, it wouldn't be dulled by the shadows of the outside. And this is all very symbolic of the type of light that was emanating from the Beit HaMikdash. Now the Greeks, what the Yevanim and the whole story of Chanukka, what they wanted to do is that they wanted to penetrate the breaches in the Beit HaMikdash. They breached the walls. They came into the Beit HaMikdash and they brought their outside culture into the Beit HaMikdash. They brought the idols into there. Okay, and their whole purpose was to darken it and to make it impure, and they wanted to dampen the light of our kedusha, of our musar, of our morality, right? All of our ideals and values, they came and they wanted to impose their outside culture on us, okay? And they wanted to impose their idea that light needs to come from outside, from foreign cultures, because everything about them was about this enlightenment and these ideals and values that they had, and they wanted to enlighten us, but not just enlighten us, right? They wanted to impose it on us by penetrating our mikdash and bringing their whole ideology into our walls, breaching our walls and coming in. And so on account of that, there were Jews who distanced themselves from the source of light. And that's what the Mityavnim were, the Jews that became Hellenistic, that they started to assimilate. And they abandoned that Rishut HaYachid. They abandoned their, like that place of their home for the Rishut of the Rabbim, for what was going on outside their doors, okay? And if you look on the next pasuk, on the next source in the Malbim, okay, so Malbim explains it also beautifully, that this idea of the Chalonei Shkufim Atumim that we read before in Sefer Malachim, that even if outside it would appear that the chalonot were wider and that they needed the light of the day, someone that was inside saw that the Or HaShechina zoreach sham, right? The light of the Shechina would rise there. The Or Hashem me'ir bichvodo, and the light of God would just illuminate the place. And that's what the Mikdash was about. It was this spiritual light that was going on. And the Greek culture, they were trying to breach, they were trying to penetrate that and come inside. So as we see here that we, the Jewish people, we were in this lowly place. We were distant. There were people that left the way of God, and that they sought that culture and abandoned the Rishut HaYachid. They abandoned what was going on inside their own homes. So how does Hashem respond? How did Hashem respond to us? In the place that we were at. If we look at the Sfat Emes, that's the right way to say it. He speaks about how Chanukka and Purim are the Bechina. Okay, we can't always understand everything that the Sfat Emes is saying because it's very, very deep stuff. But he's saying that Chanukka and Purim are the Bechina of Moshe and Aharon. And he explains that the miracle was through Kohanim, and there's a significance to that. Okay. And he brings in the idea that that the sages explain that what was the special midah of Aharon? What was special about him? That he was ohev habriot umekarvan leTorah, that he loved all creatures and he would bring them closer to Torah. And when I read this, I really think about my brother, because my brother is a Kohen, my father's a Kohen, and this is my brother. This is his whole life. His whole life. He's a Rebbe in the yeshiva high school, and his whole life is that he just loves every single student, and he teaches them Torah, and he just brings them close to Torah, and he just has that light from Aaron. Okay. And so what would Aaron do? When Aaron would see someone doing an avera, what would he do? He would become close to him until that person would be embarrassed by his own deeds. And he would say, if Aaron thinks this of me, then clearly that's who I am, right? If Aaron is seeing the best in me, then I'm going to be that better version of myself. And that was by him coming closer, okay? It wasn't that he pushed away or rejected, rather he came closer. And so Hashem does that also. In these days that Bnei Yisrael, they were shvelim, we were in a very low place. Right? And that idea that Yavan Yavan darkened the eyes of Yisrael. And so HaKadosh Baruch Hu did with us, he did miracles for us, with that extra added love, he brought us closer through those miracles, right? Rather than pushing us away and rejecting us, Hashem brought on these miracles in order to bring us closer to him. And then when God brought us closer to him through these miracles, because whenever, at least myself, whenever I feel like I have a moment that God was with me, that I have that kind of divine providence, that Hashem was with me in something, then I feel that extra closeness in my relationship, right? I feel like he's there, he's in the room, he did something for me, he healed me, whatever it is, or a moment of giving birth to my children, right? That moment after the birth, and I'm just sitting there alone with my baby and saying, Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki li olam chasto, that's that moment of just sheer closeness. And that's what he's talking about here, that through these miracles, we felt God's presence, we felt his intervention, we felt like he was there for us. And so Bnei Yisrael nimshechu achar zeh hanes, right? And Bnei Yisrael, they were drawn, they were pulled after this miracle. And that's why it says after, Ba'u banecha v'tiaru v'tihidliku, that your children came and they purified the Beit HaMikdash and they lit the candles. Kanira shayu mikodem meruchakim. It seems that before that they had been distant. And now after this miracle, God brings us closer. And through chibat hanes, through the love of the miracle, our souls were elevated of Bnei Yisrael. And kiken darkan shel Bnei Yisrael. This is the way of Bnei Yisrael, that they can, in one moment, return. We just need that one moment to return to the source of kedusha that we have within ourselves. And so, v'yesh lomar shezeh remez halel v'da'ah sheyesh lehalel al hanes. And that's why we need to give thanks for the miracle, and to recognize that we weren't worthy at all of these miracles, but only Hashem Yitbarach Isa Imanu Chiba Yetera. Hashem gave us this extra love. Through this, Yesh Lanu Litorer B'tshuva. Through this, we awaken to do tshuva, and that's why it's like the idea of what he's speaking about, that the miracle was done through Kohanim. This is the Bechina. This is the aspect of Aaron. That what Aaron would do when someone was violating and doing a sin, he would come closer. And so here, Kadosh Baruch Hu saw that we were distant from him, and he came closer to us through the miracles of Hanukkah. And then, as a result of these miracles, we came back to him. We came back to the Beit HaMikdash. We sanctified it. We lit those candles. We felt those closeness. And the idea of Hallel is to recognize that we weren't worthy of it. Right? Hashem did this as a chiba yetera. My mother always tells me the story that there's a rabbi in Riverdale called Rabbi Weiss, and whenever a parent comes and complains about their child and says, but my child doesn't do this, doesn't go to shul, doesn't wear tefillin, whatever it is, his answer is always, love him more, love her more. Okay, that's always his answer. My mom always says that. Whenever I complain, one of my children is acting up, love her more. That's always her answer, and that's Rabbi Weiss's legacy, and that's what it's talking about here. Right? The idea of Aaron was to love them more, to come closer, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu did that with us through these miracles. So as we see from what we're speaking about here, that we were distant. We were far away from Hashem. There was this idea of all of these cultures, these foreign cultures that were pulling us, and not that we were being enriched and understanding how to integrate it into our lives like the concepts of Torah or Mada, but rather it was the Mada that was taking away the Torah, right? They didn't have that balance of how to navigate the outside world and the inside world. Rather, the outside world just pulled them out of the inside world, and they didn't stay strong in their foundation, in their homes. So therefore, on Hanukkah, what we need to do is we need to go back inside of our homes, and this is to return to the original question: why don't we light the Chanukiot everywhere, in every street, right, in every culture center, in every shul, but rather every person needs to light it in his home, because on Hanukkah we need to dedicate anew our home. We need to have a refresher of that understanding that really the source of light is in the Reshut HaYachid, it's in the private sector. And from this power, right, the strength of the Reshut HaYachid, can we illuminate the Reshut HaRabim. And so the private home of a person can be this place where God rests his Shekhinah. And when a husband and a wife, when they're zochim, as we know, when they're zochim, then they can be a mikdash for the Shekhinah, right? When a husband and a wife are zochim, Shekhinah shora benehem, that God rests amongst them, in between them, and that they're able to really illuminate the outside world from their Reshut HaYachid. So the question is, how do we do this, right? It's a beautiful idea, but how do we go about this? And this is the last source that I wanted to bring in. How do we light the Reshut HaRabim? How do we illuminate the Reshut HaRabim rather than us being pulled into the Reshut HaRabim and neglecting everything, our foundations? So the answer is that I think we can see it in the source here, in the last source. We're going to read the source here. Okay, it says, Amar Rabba. Pshitali, okay, it seems to be that there's a fixed list of priorities. If someone has a limited resource of money in order to be able to carry out certain mitzvot, then there's a list of priorities. What comes first, okay? So here, ner beitov and ner Chanukah, we have this situation, right? A person is poor and they have to choose whether to buy oil for the candles in his house for Shabbat or the candles of Chanukah. What does he do? Ner beito adif. Right? He should buy the Shabbos, the oil for the Shabbos candles. And what is the reason for? Mishum Shalom Beito, because of the idea of Shalom Bayit. And that's what the lighting of the Shabbos candles are all about. It's all about the idea of Shalom Bayit, that you need to have candles so that you can see the food that you're eating. And when you speak about these lofty ideas of Shalom Bayit, the concept here is something that's very practical, and it's hard for us to relate to that now because we have electricity, right? But in those days, the concept of having the Shabbos candles is so that you can see the food that you're eating, so that you don't stumble, right? So that you don't get into a whole little fight that everybody has over the littlest, the silliest things, right? Well, why didn't you move the chair over there? Or I can't see, did you give me a fork? Where's my plate? The little things. It's always the fights that go on in the home. The candles were meant to be there to illuminate the home in order to prevent any of those quarrels so that it would be a smooth sailing, peaceful meal. So when we have that choice between the two of them, you need to buy the Shabbos candles because of Shalom Bayit. And that understanding that Shalom Bayit is the foundation of the light in the house and in the Reshut HaRabim, that understanding needs to accompany us in every area of our lives. And so when we have a home that our relationship and our marriage is refined, or a relationship with the other people that are around us, not, it doesn't have to be just in marriage. Shalom Bayit is about the whole environment of the house, right? That there needs to be that peaceful relationship between the people there. When there's loyalty and there's devotion, then you have that foundation and you have that strength that you can illuminate outwards, right? The Kedusha from inside the house can go outwards without that fear of assimilation and contamination from what is actually outside, from all the darkness outside. And this idea really resonates with me on a personal level, on the health journey that I've been going through. It's almost been a year. I started my health journey on December 7th, so it's almost a year. And one of the ideas, the foundations that the head of the program speaks about, Tova, is that what we're doing is that we're working from within, right? It's opposed to the concept of a diet culture of these quick external results, right? That aren't really sustainable, and everything is really judged by dropping a dress size or how you look, and people will come and compliment you, say, "Oh, you look so great, you look so good," and everything is the focus on the outside, but really what's going on the inside. And so the way to work on our health is to go against that whole diet culture of those ideas about the dress size and how we look and how our waist has to be, and all of those ideas that we're really bombarded with in magazines, and that our daughters are bombarded with, whether it's through radio or TV or movies or social media. That when we're approaching our own health, it needs to come from within. First, it needs to start inside. What my mindset is, how I approach it. If I want to fuel my body with healthy foods, right? If I want to do fitness so that I have the proper energy, so that I could play with my children in the park, right? We're the way that we're approaching it. And that's why this whole program has really resonated with me, because of that idea of working from inside outward. And I think that's the concept here of Chanukka. That yes, we need to publicize the miracle, and yes, we need to light up the world, but first we need to create our own personal mikdash, right? The same way that the Beit HaMikdash had those narrow windows that on the outside, and on the, so I get confused between the outside and the inside, but the idea of the windows of the Beit HaMikdash was not that the light was coming from outside in, but rather the opposite, that the light was meant to come from inside out. And that's the whole idea of Hanukkah, why we need to light our candles either in front of our homes or on our windowsills, because we need to do a bedek bayit. We need to rededicate our own home, look at our home on a personal, small scale mikdash. What are our relationships like? How do we talk to each other? How do we relate to each other? Do we have those strong bonds? And only then, when we're really connected to one another, when we really have that foundation of that shalom bayit, that's when we can illuminate outwards. And I always remember I had this conversation a long time ago with one of my rabbeim in high school, someone that I was really close with, and he said there's that if you want to give, because he saw that there was, I wanted to give and I wanted to be active and do everything. He said you always need to be connected to the electricity outlet, right? You always need to be connected to the source. And if we're not connected to the source, then we don't have the proper fuel ourselves to be able to give towards the outside. And so we always need to make sure that we ourselves are fueled with the proper energy and the proper spirituality, so that we can be able to give towards the outside. So Hanukkah, it's a national chag, but it really starts with the home and lighting from the home outside to the rest of the world. Bezrat Hashem, we should all be zocha. It's a real tefillah. It's a real it's hard. It's a hard work. think I was just signed out.
Hey,
I don't know.
okay.
Oh, maybe not. Does anybody have any questions?